Hey guys, tonight we're time traveling somewhere wonderfully miserably miserable right into the mud-caked heart of the Middle Ages. Imagine, your feet squish through ankle-deep muck. The smell of manure slaps you harder than your boss ever could, and every building leans like it gave up centuries ago. Chickens flap through alleyways. Someone dumps a chamber pot with zero warning, and a pig eyes you like it owns the place. You're not on a grand adventure. You're on your way to being someone else's property. The truth is, medieval Europe wasn't all gallant knights and courtly love. Most people, yes, even the so-called free, were scraping by under systems that weren't exactly big on liberty. And if you were born unlucky, well, you might spend your whole life bent over a plow that didn't even belong to you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and the time you're listening in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're nodding off from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a squat little village surrounded by wet fields and sheep that seem to stare too long. The thatched roofs leak. The dirt paths don't dry. The food smells vaguely sour, even on a good day. If you were hoping for medieval luxury, you've taken a terrible wrong turn. You might think, well, at least I'm not a slave. But the twist is being a medieval slave doesn't always look like what you expect. In fact, some enslaved folks ate better than you. Some lived inside the manor house. Some even earned wages. Of course they couldn't leave, ever. But hey, minor details. See, in this damp corner of the world, life is already hard enough that formal slavery almost blends in. You're working the land. So are slaves. You owe your lord 3 chickens a year. Slaves owe the same. You sleep in a cold one-room shack. Guess what? So do they. Except they don't even own the shack. But don't relax yet. Because here, not a slave is not the same as free. You've likely been born a villainous semi-free peasant, legally tied to the land you work. Which means if you want to leave, marry, or sell your goat, you might need your lord's written permission. And maybe a bribe. The word slave in this era can mean different things depending on who's talking. In England, slavery as it existed under Rome was technically abolished by the 12th century. But let's not break out the champagne. Instead, systems of serfdom and other forms of unfreedom took its place. And they weren't exactly a vacation. Your day starts early. Before the sun rises, you're outside possibly barefoot feeding pigs, or gathering wood with fingers that barely move in the frost breakfast. A crust of black bread, and ale so weak, even your 3-year-old drinks it. Then, off to the fields for your lord's harvest. Your own vegetables can wait assuming you've planted any this year. You hear a bell ring. That's not church. That's the signal from the manor someone important wants something now. A pig slaughtered. A message carried. A ditch dug. You can't say no. Saying no might mean fines. Or worse, a punishment that leaves no bruises but plenty of humiliation. Like being made to sit in a pond. In winter, the mud never quite leaves your clothes, and the smell never quite leaves your nose. You wash occasionally, if there's time, or soap, and you rarely go further than the next village lest you're sold, which yes, can still happen in some regions, like certain parts of Eastern Europe, where actual slave markets persist into the late Middle Ages. And yet, amid the squalor, you hear rumors that some slaves in noble households sleep on straw inside the manor, that they get fresh stew, even a little coin. Your neighbor scoffs at this, says they're still chained to misery. But you wonder, would it be that different from your own life? Historians still argue whether medieval serfdom should count as slavery. Some say no, it's not chattel slavery like in later centuries. Others say yes, it strips your mobility, your autonomy, your right to say no. And then there are those frustrating scholars who say, well, it's complicated. Helpful, right? You learn to keep your head down. Not just because your back hurts, but because making eye contact with the wrong person can earn you another task, or worse, their attention. You've heard about girls who caught the eye of a steward and never walked the same again. But that's someone else's story. For now, Your life is ruled by seasons and obligations. Winter brings hunger, spring brings mud, summer brings sweat, and autumn brings fear because that's when dues are collected. And if your harvest failed, better pray your Lord had a good year, or you might find your only option is selling a child, ... or yourself. The church offers some comfort. There's a priest who reads Latin and tells you that suffering is holy, that slaves and poor folk are closer to God because of their hardship. You nod, you cross yourself. You try not to wonder why the priest's hands are soft and his robe doesn't smell like manure. And yet, there are small joys. A warm bowl of pottage shared with neighbors. A song hummed while sowing seed. The stars on a clear night when the fires go out and the pigs stop squealing. Even here, even now, humanity clings like ivy on the manor walltuff, wiry and always growing. You try not to think about tomorrow, about whether the tax collector will come, about the sick cow, about the shadow that passed over your child's eyes this morning. You curl up in your straw, next to your wife, your mother, your goats, and sleep if you can with the sound of someone else coughing through the wall, and you whisper to yourself, "At least, I'm not a slave." But in your bones, you wonder if that's true. You wake up before the sun again, same as yesterday, same as tomorrow. The rooster hasn't even cleared his throat yet, but you're already up, pulling on a coarse wool tunic that never quite dries. Always smells faintly of onions and wet hay. Your hands feel like cracked bark. Your knees ache like they've been grinding gravel. And as you step outside into the dew and mud, you wonder again, what does it actually mean to be not free in a place where nobody really is? The thing about medieval slavery is, it's not uniform. There's no one-size-fits-all chain. Instead, there's a confusing menu of unfreedoms, and everyone around you is stuck ordering off it. Let's walk through the options, shall we? First, up, serfs like you, probably. You're legally bound to the land, not to a person. You can't move without permission, but you're not bought and sold individually. You pay dues in labor, sometimes in produce, and sometimes even in coin. You might get a tiny strip of land to call your own, though own is a strong word. You're more like Lund, at the mercy of your lord's mood. Then there are villains, a term often used interchangeably with serfs, but sometimes implying an even lower status. You're more heavily taxed, more restricted, and often expected to perform extra duties. If your lord wants to marry off your daughter to another man's tenant, you nod, you smile. You boil inside, but you nod. Next up, boarders and cotters. These are peasants with even fewer resources, perhaps just a small garden patch, or the right to gather sticks from the Lord's woods. They're like the gig workers of feudal society. Flexible, sort of independent, but always vulnerable. You envy their freedom some days. You pity their hunger on others. But beyond these categories lies a deeper level. Thralls, slaves, or in Latin, servi. This is where things get interesting and depressing. These folks can be bought and sold, just like livestock. In some parts of Europe, especially earlier in the medieval period, or in places like Scandinavia and Iberia, slavery, in this stricter sense, survives well into the Middle Ages. A slave might be traded, gifted, inherited. Imagine being included in someone's wedding dowry like a nice casserole dish. You might think, surely that's rare. But no, there were entire markets dedicated to the buying and selling of people. Slavic slaves were in especially high demand, giving us the very word, slave, from the root Slav. Irony, huh? You're from Eastern Europe. Your ancestors spoke a Slavic language. And suddenly, you're the commodity that oils the gears of Mediterranean wealth. Still, the weirdest part. Some of these slaves lived better than you. A domestic slave in a wealthy household might eat white bread, wear decent clothes, and even learn a few letters of Latin. They're still owned, of course. Still a legal object. But you catch yourself wondering, would a warm bed and regular meals be worth it? And here's a real head-scratcher. Some enslaved people owned property. In parts of medieval Spain, for example, there are records of slaves who had small savings, or livestock, or even other slaves, though historians still argue whether those documents exaggerate or reflect special cases. This isn't to say there Life was good, just that medieval categories were messy, inconsistent, and often completely baffling to modern minds. Then there's the church's input. Canon law technically opposes the enslavement of Christians by Christians, but local practice is, let's say, flexible. In Christian kingdoms, enslaved Muslims are fair game. In Islamic ones, captured Christians often serve as slaves. And when both sides get tired of fighting, they exchange prisoners like livestock, because, well, that's how livestock is treated too. You hear a whispered tale at the well about a nun who owned a slave. Yes, a nun. She inherited the poor soul from her wealthy parents, and couldn't legally set him free without monastery approval. The nuns made him work the vegetable garden. Some say he was happier than most layfolk. Others say he wept every night. Who's to know? The record ends with his death and a note about carrots. Some people do escape this system. Rarely. You hear about a man who fled his village, lived, in the forest, and re-emerged years later with a fake identity and a job in a city tannery. But, more often, escape ends in public branding, or worse, being shackled to the manor gates as a warning to others. Still, the terminology blurs further. In Byzantine records, for instance, there's a status called paramon, a person not quite free, not quite enslaved, but bound to serve a household for life, unless released. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And then there's the weird case of the famula household dependents, who aren't technically slaves, but can't leave or refuse work. Like a medieval internship that never ends and pays in barley gruel. You walk back from the fields, shoulders sore, knowing full well you're not considered a slave. You have rights, technically. The right to marry, to hold a strip of land, to pray without someone's permission. But none of these stop your lord from demanding extra labor next week. None of these protect your son from being drafted into a war you've never even heard of. You share a bit of ale with your neighbor, old Henrik, who's seen 60 winters probably. He tells you his grandfather was a thrall, stolen from the Baltic coast by Norse raiders and sold in York. He worked as a carpenter's helper and was freed after 20 years. He stayed, Henrik says. Didn't know where else to go. You wonder about staying, too. Or if the stone walls of your village might ever let you leave. But for now, you head back inside. Another day waits, full of not quite freedom, not quite slavery, and exactly the kind of life historians love to argue about. You're born into a world that doesn't even ask your name before deciding your worth. The midwife holds you up, announces a boy or a girl, and somewhere, unspoken but understood, a far more important word hangs over your cradle. Service slave, or if you're slightly luckier, nativist born, unfree, but not technically chattel. A medieval peasant baby doesn't cry louder than a noble one, but their future's already shackled by ancestry, obligation, and dirt floors. You lie swaddled in scratchy linen beside the hearth, and it's already settled you will belong to the land. Not in a poetic, nature is healing sort of way. No, you belong to the land because your parents do. And your parents belong to the land because their parents did, and so on. You're part of the human furniture, passed down with the thatch roof, and the leaky ale barrels. There's no dramatic ceremony to mark your unfreedom. No collar snapped around your neck. Just paperwork if anyone bothers to write it down. Or sometimes, just a lord's memory. That boy's a villain. His father owed me a sow, and that's it. That's your social origin story. You take your first steps on soil, you're not allowed to leave. When you fall face first into a puddle, that's technically the Lord's puddle. The air in your lungs, well, they haven't figured out how to tax that yet, but give it time. Your chores begin early. By the age of 5 or 6, you're picking stones from the fields, scaring crows, or hauling buckets from the well. Childhood, as you'd define it today, doesn't exist here. Play happens in the margins. If you're lucky, you get carved toys, maybe a rag doll. If not, you play with mud. Mud's free. Mud doesn't mind your legal status. School, not for you. Maybe the priest teaches a few village boys Latin hymns, if their fathers are free tenants. Or, oh, special service to the church. You, though, you'll learn your alphabet from counting turnips if you learn it at all, and yet, You're watched, catalogued, somewhere tucked in the manor rolls, or remembered by the steward's dry voice. Is a record, your name, your parents' names, what you owe. 1 pig per year. 8 days of labor per month. Every 10th chicken, if you have chickens. Which you probably don't. Not yet. You see other children, some running free during feast days. Others looking to clean, to plump. The sons of reeves, or bailiffs, who serve the Lord directly. Their families still work the land, but with a twist of power. Some may even be freemen, with rights to sell land and pass it down. You don't hate them. You just observe them. Like strange birds you're not allowed to mimic. Your mother tells you stories while spinning wool. Tales of saints who freed slaves. Of angels who lifted poor farmers to heaven. Of kings who abolished bondage, but only after they finished using it. You ask if saints visit your village. She says, only the hungry ones. You're baptized, of course. The church insists on that. You're told you're equal in the eyes of God, though not in the eyes of the reeve, or the baker, or the man who owns the only ox in the village. The priest offers blessings, not liberation. He reminds your father to tithe, reminds your mother to stay chaste, and tells you to obey, especially if your Lord asks something difficult. At 12, you're more or less an adult. If you're a girl, you might already be married or, at least, promised. If you're a boy, your hands are hardening from field work, and your back knows what a plow feels like. Your labor is now valuable. And guess what? That means you're now taxable. You learn early that every season has its price. In spring, it's planting grain for your Lord before tending your own meager plot. In summer, it's haymaking. Autumn, you're in full harvest mode, giving the best of your crop away first, and winter. That's when hunger sharpens the air, and people start selling possessions or each other. Yes, really, selling people. It's technically frowned upon in some places by this point, but it still happens in the shadows, in debt settlements, and across lawless borders. You've heard whispers about a family nearby who lent their daughter to a steward in exchange for seed grain. No one asks questions. No one wants the answers. Your dreams don't stretch far. Maybe a pair of shoes. Maybe a sheep of your own. Maybe marrying a girl whose father hasn't promised her to the tanner's son. But even those dreams have to pass through the Lord's gate. And that gate is more like a sieve. Most things don't make it through. Your only real control comes in the smallest ways. You choose how fast to work, who to flirt with during the Feast of St. Martin, where to hide your extra cabbage. These are your rebellions, quiet and precious and fragile. The idea of freedom flits in and out of your thoughts, like a firefly. Not the wild, roaring freedom of modern imagination, just the simple kind. The right to leave, to say no, to raise your children without someone else's permission. But here, in this dirt-walled cottage, freedom feels like a word meant for other people. Nobles, priests, men who speak French or Latin, and even among slaves. There are gradations. You hear about bondswomen in other towns who live better than free widows. About household thralls who can read and quote scripture. It confuses you. If they can read and eat pork every Friday, how enslaved can they really be? But then you meet an old woman who remembers being sold twice. Once as a girl to a monastery. Once again, after her lord died and his debts were paid with human chattel. She has no teeth, but her voice cuts clean. Don't matter what they call you, child. If you can't leave, you ain't free. And that's the truth that settles into your bones. It's not about chains or labels or Latin terminology. It's about whether you can go, whether you're allowed to vanish and start again. And here, you know exactly how far you're allowed to go. From the field, to the hut, and back again. You wake with a start. Something's already gone wrong. It's still dark, but your mother's not beside the hearth. Your father's outside, cursing in the wind. A cow has slipped her tether again, and that means another hour lost before sunrise, another hour of work. For the manor gone unpaid, a tally marked somewhere by someone who's never dirtied their hands with cow dung, and yet the cow is your only lifeline. Without her milk, your porridge turns thin, your stomach emptier. You scramble to help, tripping over icy stones, barefoot. Your breath puffs like smoke. And even as your fingers freeze against the coarse rope, all you can think about is how late you'll be to your corvée. Your required labor for the Lord. You do this all before breakfast. Not that breakfast is a meal. It's a chunk of rye bread, hard as your uncle's knuckles, and some bitter ale, because water makes people sick more often than not. You nod quietly, watching your shadow lengthen as the sun reluctantly crawls over the trees. Then you trudge to the fields. The Lord's field, not yours. Yours is the scrap of land behind your hut that you work in secret moments. But the field that matters, the one with the best topsoil and the straight furrows, belongs to him or her. Sometimes it's a lady, especially if she's widowed and powerful. Either way, their names are carved in legal documents. Yours is, maybe scratched on a stick. Somewhere you pick up a hoe and begin. The soil is cold and clumped. Your back protests immediately, but you know better than to slow down. A steward is always watching, and he sees with the kind of eyes that measure laziness in half-breaths. Work slowly, and you'll get extra shifts. Work quickly, and the Lord will just assign more. Lunch comes when the sun is highest. You sit under a tree and share a thin pottage grain boiled with cabbage, if you're lucky. If not, it's turnip. Again, you chew mechanically, eyes closed, not to savor it, but to imagine something else. Meat, maybe cheese, a tart. You once heard of fish served with honey. What kind of world allows that? The work resumes. It doesn't stop when your arms burn or your fingers crack. It only stops when the sun leaves and the flies arrive. Sometimes you stay late, summoned for boon work, the Lord's extra special. Projects, fixing a fence, repairing a wall, hauling logs. These tasks aren't optional, even if they're called favors. And if you think your toil ends in the field, think again. Once you get home, your own garden needs tending, your animals need feeding, your children need calming, and your hands need soaking. But there's no water hot enough to unbend your spine. No salve for a life that's one long ache. You know by now your body's not built for longevity. You're 22 and feel twice that. Your neighbor lost 3 teeth this year. Your cousin's foot turned black and simply stopped being useful. No one has names for these conditions. You just work until your body refuses, and then you find work that uses a different part of it. Diet doesn't help. Most days, you eat bread, pottage, more bread, and occasionally onions or beans if it's summer. Meat is rare, unless you poach it tanned. If you're caught poaching, you'll lose more than the rabbit. Maybe a hand. Maybe your whole livelihood. You once saw a man put in the stocks for 3 days, because his snare accidentally caught one of the Lord's peacocks. Peacocks. As if birds that pretty should even exist in the same world as your empty bowl. And still, some slaves, real slaves, are eating better than you. The domestic ones, again, they serve inside, where it's warm. They polish silver, scrub floors, dress their masters. They may sleep on straw too, but it's inside, with walls. You try not to envy them. They can't leave. They have no say in who they marry or when. But still you envy the stew, the shelter, and here's the strangest part. Sometimes, the system uses your hunger against you. There are records of lords offering food bonuses for extra work, or for ratting out a fellow peasant. Tell us who stole the sack of oats, and you get 3 eggs. People don't stay quiet long when their children are crying from hunger. Historians still debate whether medieval peasant life was truly wretched, or just modestly difficult. Some argue that, during good harvest years, peasants lived okay, ate varied diets, celebrated feasts, owned chickens. But that's the thing. You remember the feast days, because they're rare. You remember meat, because it stands out like a dream. A bad harvest, though, that's not rare. That's every 3rd year, if not more. You've lived through one where the grain turned black with fungus, one where the river flooded the barley fields, one where the taxman took everything, feast or famine. And when famine comes, slaves suffer, yes. But you, as a peasant, get squeezed first. Because your dues don't vanish when your crops do. You still owe your portion. If you can't, pay in grain, pay in chickens. No chickens, pay in labor. No labor, Then what do you have left? Your body you know of girls who entered service in noble houses during lean winters. It's called service because no one wants to call it what it really is. Some come back. Most don't. The village makes no mention of them, their families. Just work harder and say less. You pass a tree on the way back home, and on it is carved the old rune for hunger. The mark's been there since your grandfather's time. It's not a warning. It's a fact, like the weather, or taxes, or the fact that the steward always collects early when your goat's gone lame. Still, you carry on, because there's no other way. Because the sun always rises, and the soil always needs turning, and your children always need feeding, because you're not a slave, technically, but you work as hard as one, eat worse than one, and dream the same dream, of stopping, of resting, of disappearing into some imagined freedom, where your worth isn't measured in how much wheat you harvest. In a day, you've been summoned to the manor today, which means one of two things. Either someone died, or someone needs something cleaned. Either way, you try to brush the straw off your tunic and rinse your hands before walking the crooked road past the dovecote and the sour pond where laundry water goes to die. The manor looms not grand like a castle, but it's a palace compared to your hovel. 2 stories, stone walls, glazed windows only 3, but still, and a proper wooden door that doesn't flap in the wind. You knock. Someone inside groans. You're let in. Your task, housework, which sounds easier than the fields, until you realize how many layers of awful live inside these walls. First, the smells. Chamber pots, roasting meats, wet dogs, damp rushes, the faint reek of forgotten fish bones in the kitchen corner. Second, the gossip, which is constant, petty, and always potentially dangerous in this world, cleaning the wrong. Room to slowly your hearing the wrong think, end with your ears boxed, or your name added to the lazy list. That's a real list. The steward keeps it in his ledger, somewhere between grain tallies and who owes him bread loaves. You scrub floors, polish pewter, haul buckets, and dodge the lord's terrier, who has a vendetta against your ankles. The lady of the house is away, but her ladies-in-waiting aren't. They drift by like perfume ghosts, whispering behind hands, tossing you sideways glances like you're a boot someone forgot to clean. One of them asks your name. You answer carefully, not too quiet, not too bold. She asks if you can read. You shake your head. She laughs. Didn't think so. Then she drops her handkerchief and makes you pick it up with a curtsy. She doesn't thank you. Still, as humiliating as this is, there's food here. Real food. You see it being chopped in. The kitchen. Onions, leeks, a pheasant. There's saffron, for heaven's sake. Saffron, a spice worth more than you. You wonder if they notice the way you stare. Eyes half-dashed starved. One of the cooks gives you a crust of pie when no one's looking. You mouth thank you and hide it in your pocket like gold. It's the most flavor you've tasted in months. Sleeping arrangements, if you're staying overnight, are unpredictable. You might get the straw pallet in the scullery. You might get the storeroom beside the barrels of vinegar. You definitely get a blanket that's never been washed. But again inside, roof over your head. No frost. No pigs. You overhear the steward talking about the linen shortage. Someone's been stealing strips to sell at the market. Probably one of the bonded girls, he says. Like that narrows it down. You know he's talking about the kitchen help. One girl's new, small sharpet, wears her hair braided like a city girl. Later, you see her sneaking a threadbare cloth into her sleeve. You look away, because you get it. The gossip thickens around dinner. The lord is hosting a merchant from the south. You're allowed nowhere near the great hall, but the murmurs make it through the walls. They're discussing trade, lands, wine, and people. Specifically, a captured slave being brought north from Granada. Expensive, someone mutters, but obedient. It hits you like cold water. People are still being bought and sold, not just in distant empires, but here, in this country you thought had moved past all that. You don't say anything. Who would listen? But it makes the floor feel shakier under your feet. The scullion boy tells you the best gossip, that the lord's younger son might marry the daughter of a moneylender, not noble, not even landowning, but rich. Can you imagine? He scoffs. You nod solemnly. You're not thinking about marriage. You're thinking about what kind of dowry makes people forget a bad bloodline. Before bed, you're given another task. Slop the dogs. It sounds simple until you meet them huge, drooling beasts with moods worse than monks in Lent. You toss them bones, try not to get bitten, and back away slowly, praying no one notices the sleeve you tore, scrambling over the fence. Your hands are cut, your feet blistered, your ears still burning from the lady's mockery. But when you crawl into that scratchy blanket beside the cold pantry wall, you feel something strange. Warmth. Not just from the room, but from the briefest sense of being inside. Being closer to power, even if only as a shadow in the corner. And you start to understand why some unfree people prefer manor life. Why a few might even choose, if choosing is a thing you get to do. The food, the shelter, the access to information, even the slim chance of social climbing by catching a noble's favorites, like a tiny ladder in a deep pit. Narrow, crooked, but tempting. Historians still argue whether domestic slaves had better lives than field workers. Some say yes, less physical exhaustion, more consistent food. Others argue, no constant surveillance, more vulnerability to abuse, and the ever-present danger of being lent out, or worse. And some, of course, say it depends on the household. It always depends on the household. You sleep fitfully. At one point, you hear laughter from the great hall, then someone being sick outside. You wonder if the slave from Granada will arrive before the month's end. You wonder if he'll sleep in a bed nicer than yours. You wonder if you'll be asked to scrub his floor, to dot, and then you dream not of freedom, but of stew, of blankets, of a locked room where no one can summon you before dawn. A strange dream, a hopeful one, maybe even a dangerous one. You're back home in your village after 3 days at the manor, and even though your back is bent and your pride feels trampled, you almost miss the stone floors and warm hearth. Out here, the wind slips through the cracks in your walls like it's invited. Your only luxury is the smell of burning peat and your goat grumbling in her sleep. Still, you're not technically a slave, right? You remind yourself of that, again and again. But then someone says something strange. Old Martin, who keeps track of everything no one asked him to. He says the smith's boy down the road bought his freedom, bought like it's something on the market shelf next to salted fish. You blink. Bought, you ask, as if hearing it wrong. Martin grunts. Earned coin, working side jobs. Paid the fee. Got papers and all. No longer bound. You stare at him, mouth slightly open. Earn coin, from whom? You don't get paid for. Manor work. But then Martin explains. Certain jobs, charcoal making, spinning, even brewing, can be sold to nearby townsfolk. Some lords allow it. Some even encourage it. They get a cut, of course. The lord always gets a cut. But whatever's left, you can save. You didn't know saving was a thing. Most weeks, you measure success in whether your stew had an actual vegetable in it. But now the idea roots itself in your brain. You, earning your way out. Could it happen? So you start watching, asking, listening closely during Sunday markets. Turns out, not all unfree people are equally trapped. A few have rights, specific clauses in their lord's custom rolls that let them keep chickens, or travel short distances, or, most tantalizingly, earn and save coin. Take Geoffrey, the tanner's cousin. Technically a villain, but he owns a brewing kettle, and the ale he makes is so strong it can stun a bishop. He pays dues, yes, but what's left over? He sells. Quietly, his wife helps, and his oldest son is rumored to be learning Latin not for the church, but for business. And there's Maud, the weaver. No one quite remembers how she got her loom, but she makes the softest wool cloaks in 4 villages. The reeve looks the other way, because she repairs his gloves every winter for free. Your mind spins. These people still legally bound, still required to give labor and chicken's butt. They're building something inside the cage. Like birds tucking feathers into the cracks. There are even tales whispered, barely believed, of slaves who were freed in wills. A priest leaves his servant, her freedom, and a pig. A widow grants release to her lady's maid and 40 copper coins. These are rare, you're told, but not impossible. You cling to that word. Of course, not every perk is noble. One woman you know became a concubine to a merchant. No marriage, no promises. But she wore shoes. Ate meat. Her family didn't. Talk about it. But they also didn't starve that winter. There's an argument still echoing today about whether medieval slavery offered mobility, not in the physical sense you're stuck where you're born, but in the economic one. Some scholars argue that the very ambiguity of medieval slavery, so different from the rigid systems centuries later, allowed occasional advancement. If you were smart, if you were lucky, if your lord wasn't too cruel, or your steward wasn't too greedy. Others call this nonsense. They say these are exceptions that prove the rule. That most enslaved and unfree people never escape. That every success story leaves behind a trail of broken backs and lost children. You're not sure who's right. But one evening, after market, you tuck 2 pennies into a hole behind your firewood stack. Just to see. Just to start. You also begin learning things you were never taught. How to read tally marks. How to barter better. You ask the miller's apprentice to explain weights. You watch how the steward writes in his ledger when he thinks no one is looking. One day, your lord's messenger arrives. They need someone to help move supplies to a distant village. 6 days of travel. Your hesitant leaving is risky. But the steward says they'll feed you, and you might even earn a silver penny. Silver, it's your first real taste of the outside world. Bigger towns, more people, new smells. A tavern where music plays from strings, and no one asks your status as long as your hands carry something useful. You're just another body in the crowd, and it feels like the closest thing to anonymity you've ever had. When you return, you hide your silver with the others. The idea has grown stronger. Not just freedom, but choice. Maybe you don't become a landowner. Maybe you don't wear linen. But maybe, just maybe, you stop asking permission to marry. Or to die somewhere that isn't here. You now see the system's cracks. The ways in which people nudge the rules, reinterpret them, bend them into tools instead of cages. Even the church sometimes plays along. The local abbot writes manumission letters for a price. One monk even says, all souls are free before God. You wonder how far that theology can stretch. Of course. Not everyone approves. Old Henrik shakes his head at your growing stash. Better to keep your head down, he mutters. Money gets you noticed, and when you're noticed, you're taxed. Or married off, or worse. But you don't listen. You begin saving scraps of parchment, a quill, stolen ink, bartered. You practice the shapes the steward makes. Letters like walking paths. Words like keys. Someday, you think, you might write your own name. On your own document. And maybe, just maybe, add a line that says, no longer bound. You're 28 now, and it shows. Your knees creak before you stand. Your back knots itself before noon. You've lost a tooth, maybe too honestly. It's hard to remember which came out first. But you've gained something too. A secret. Stash of coin, buried deep beneath the hearthstones where the chickens won't scratch it up. A tiny hoard of hope, by now. The whispers have reached every ear. More lords are granting manumission, the official release from bondage. Not out of kindness, of course. Sometimes it's for coin. Sometimes it's to avoid feeding old tenants, who can't work anymore. Sometimes it's purely to clear land for sheep, because sheep don't complain when their cottage collapses. But it's real. People are being freed. Papers are being signed. And the idea burns brighter inside you than the hearth ever could. The Lord's clerk visits once a month now, posting notices on the chapel door. You can't read them yet, not fully, but you pretend you can, squinting at the loops and slashes, mouthing the names out loud. You see manumitter scribbled more often these days. A Latin word with sharp edges. It means someone, somewhere, gets to leave. And you start to imagine what you'd do with a slip like that in your hands. Would you stay in the village and rent land for real wages? Flee to a city and start fresh? Or just walk until your feet blister and your lungs fill with air that no one can tax? But freedom isn't free. Never has been. Not in the Middle Ages, and not now. The clerk charges 5 silver pennies for a petition, another 2 for the priest's seal. 3 more to have it witnessed by someone reputable, which in your case means someone with shoes, and even then, the Lord can say no. There's a story of a man named Osric, spent 5 years, building up coin from charcoal selling, paid every fee, got the petition, got the witnesses, and then his Lord died. The new heir barely 20 tore up the document, claimed Osric had faked it. No one dared disagree. Osric was whipped and sent back to the fields. He limped for life. Still, people try. Some succeed. You watch them go, men, women, even families, holding tightly to their new status like it might blow away in the wind. The village murmurs, gossips, resents them a little. But secretly, everyone watches the path they walk and wonders if their footprints will stay. You prepare quietly. You fix up your best tunic. Clean your hands with lye until they're raw but presentable. Practice your words in front of the hearth. You want to sound respectful, not desperate. Definitely not uppity. And then you hear it. Your Lord is ill, old, dying. And he's known to sign favors on his deathbed, some out of piety, some because he thinks it makes the pain stop. Either way, a window opens. You go to the manor with your petition. You bow. You speak your piece. You present the coin, every last bit of it, heart pounding. The steward accepts it like a man sorting carrots. The clerk squints, scratches something in his book. They say nothing. Just tell you to wait. 3 days. Then the summons comes. You are handed a folded slip of parchment with a broken wax seal. Your name is written on it, half-mangled Latin, but unmistakable. It says, you're free. Manumitted, no longer bound to the land, the manor, or the family who owned you. You step outside, and everything looks the same. The sky is still gray. The sheep still smell awful. The mud still clings to your boots like a curse, but something has shifted. You can leave, and yet you don't. Not at first, because freedom is more complicated than a paper. You have no land, no real trade, no family outside the village. And besides, if you leave, you might be mistaken for a runaway. Free status is fragile unless someone else confirms it. No one believes it, so you stay a while longer. Working for coin this time, you walk taller, but not too tall. You carry your parchment everywhere, folded in oilcloth, close to your chest, like a relic. Others begin to ask questions. How did you do it? What did it cost? What words did you say? They think you have a secret. You do. But it's not a trick or a spell. It's patience, observation, and knowing which steward drinks too much and talks too freely at harvest feasts. Of course, now that you're free, your old dues are gone. But your new ones arrive just as quickly. Tolls, gate fees, rent. Nothing's free, even freedom. But now you choose who to pay, who to work for, who to ignore. You visit the town more often, a place with cobbled streets and crooked shops, and people who walk without asking permission. You hear more languages, see more faces, smell more bread. You're anonymous here, which is frightening and thrilling. No one here knows you were ever bound. You could tell them you're a merchant, a pilgrim, a scholar fallen on hard times. No one would believe the last one. You meet other freed folk. Some made good lives, some floundered. One man spent his coin on silk shoes and got robbed by children on the first night. Another woman now runs a weaving stall and pays taxes with pride. Historians still argue whether medieval manumission was meaningful or just symbolic. Did it truly change lives, or just shuffle them into new burdens? Some say it was a trap. Lords freed the old, the sick, the unprofitable. Others claim it was the beginning of something better, of a shifting system, slowly dissolving the ancient grip of bondage. You don't care about the debate. You care that the sky feels different, that the steward no longer calls your name in the same voice, that you slept last night without fear of being woken from midnight threshing. Freedom, it turns out, is quiet. It's not parades or fanfare. It's standing in your doorway at dawn and realizing you can walk away, and no one can stop you, and maybe one day you will. You finally leave, not in a blaze of defiance or some grand goodbye. Just early one morning, after the cock crows and the village is still curled up in sleep, You pack what little you have. Your freedom paper, a wrapped loaf of barley bread, a knife with a bone handle, and 3 coins stitched inside your tunic lining. You leave behind the house you were born in, the fields you bled into, and the goat who, honestly, never liked you that much anyway. And you walk. You pass trees you've never noticed, birds that don't bother to move when you approach, and a stream that glints silver in the morning light. You keep walking, afraid to stop, afraid that if you look back, you'll freeze in place and never move again. And what awaits you? You don't know. But for the first time, that's the point. The town greets you with noise, so much noise. Hammering, shouting, wheezing. There's a fishmonger barking prices, and a child running with a wooden hoop. Your eyes don't know where to land. You feel like a ghost from another century. You keep your mouth shut and your paper closed at first. Life is harder than you imagined. No one cares about your past. No one owes you anything. You try to find work, but you don't have a trade knot, a proper one. You know how to sow barley and stack hay and gut fish, but so do 100 others. The town's full of people like you, freed, fled, fallen. You sleep one night in a stable, one under an archway, and one curled behind barrels in a cooper's alley. Hunger becomes a humming tune behind your ribs. It's the same song you knew in the village, but here it plays faster. Then, a break. A woman named Lean needs help in her kitchen. She makes stews for workers and sells them in thick clay bowls. You stir, you carry firewood, you keep quiet. She feeds you and lets you sleep on a mat near the hearth. Her daughter teaches you to read signs, the ones nailed to doorposts. She laughs when you mispronounce things, but you keep learning. Soon, you're hired as a porter, carrying crates, barrels, stones, even the occasional pig. It's brutal work, but it pays. You save coins again, this time wrapped in linen and hidden in a broken jar behind Lean's oven. You think, someday, of buying tools, or starting your own stall. Maybe meat pies. People always want meat pies. The town, unlike the village, has rules, but also gaps in those rules. If you're smart, you can exist in the in-between. You see others doing it, freedmen who run errands for clerks, deliver messages for nobles, run dice games in dark corners. Some get caught, some vanish, but some rise. You even meet a man who was once a full slave in Granada. He's now a spice grinder, working with a Moorish merchant. Speaks 3 languages, wears rings. He tells you, freedom is a ladder, but most people only climb 1 rung. You don't understand at first, but you think about it, especially when your arms ache and your coin purse is still too light. And then you hear something that stops you cold. Someone is collecting slaves again. Not here in the town, but just outside. Mercenaries, rogue knights, and even some clergy. Technically illegal in your region, but the law is often a suggestion in the borderlands. Captured people, usually criminals, sometimes just the unlucky, sold off quietly to merchants headed south. You wonder how many papers like yours have been crumpled and burned. How many freedmen have vanished into shadows with no one to protest. You sew your manumission paper into your tunic now, beneath a patch so worn no one would think to look. Historians still argue whether medieval freedom was real or just rebranded submission. Was manumission a doorway or a disguise? Was the town a place of liberation or just a different kind of cage, one with better bread? You begin to see both sides. You've met people with ambition and people with fear so thick it pours out of their skin. You've met priests who believe freedom is sacred and sheriffs who treat freedmen like livestock without the courtesy of feeding them. And yet something changes in you. You start speaking more, asking questions, attending town meetings, quiet at first, then bold enough to make suggestions. One day, you propose a new route for the porters to avoid the icy stairs. They listen, then they do it. You feel like someone. You even help a boy write his name. His parents are bondfolk from another village, but he was born here, never enslaved. He writes in shaky lines, tongue poking from his lips. You tell him to press harder. Letters should leave marks, and now you see it. Freedom isn't just in the parchment, it's in the details. In carrying your name like it weighs something, in eating when you choose, even if it's simple food, in sitting down without waiting for permission. Still, the fear doesn't leave. You jump when guards shout. You flinch when someone reaches too fast. You walk wide circles around men with embroidered gloves. Freedom, it seems, is a state of body before it becomes a state of mind. You dream of owning land. Not much, just a strip. Enough to plant beans and maybe a pear tree. You hear of towns giving land to freedmen who serve in the watch. You consider it, but swords have never been your thing. You still flinch at the sight of blood. Instead, you bake. You start helping Leanne's daughter more. She teases you less. Now calls you breadback. You think it's a nickname. You hope freedom doesn't feel like a celebration. It feels like uncertainty. Like staring at the edge of a cliff and realizing you get to decide whether to leap or build a bridge. But you know this much. No one owns your time anymore. And that, above all, is what keeps you walking forward. Your bread sells. Not much, not at first, but enough. Just a few loaves at the open-air stall that Lean lends you every third Thursday, and people start noticing. The crust has bite, says one man, like it knows a secret. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a warning, but he comes back the next week. You don't call yourself a baker yet. That would be a stretch. But you know dough, and more importantly, you know people. What they like, what they frown at, what they'll pay for, and what they'll gossip about later. You add salt to one loaf, honey to another. People argue over which is better. You let them. One day, a minor merchant's wife stops by. Her hands are ringed like church windows, but she's barefoot in the mud, her servant carrying her satchel. She buys 2 loaves. You nod, try not to stare. She asks, "Who taught you?" You lie, say your mother. She nods like that matters. Then she disappears into the crowd. 3 days later, the steward of her house comes looking for you. Turns out, she wants someone to bake small round cakes for a feast. Just 30, spiced, if you know how. You don't, but you say yes. You borrow Lean's mortar and pestle. Grind what few cloves and cinnamon sticks you can afford. Work through the night. Burn 2 batches. Curse the oven. Pray over the last dozen. They're not perfect, but they're good. She pays in coin. Real coin. You almost drop it. That night, you add it to your growing stash and think, I'm not going back. Back to the village, to the manor, to the days when your labor was just part of someone else's inventory. You're building something here. Something that smells like cardamom and independence. Other freed folk start to notice you. They nod at you in the square. Share tips. One man tells you how to hide income from the tax. Tallymen stuff it in the bread, if you dare. Another shows you how to sharpen your knife without drawing blood. Community forms like Dostiki, slow and stronger with time. You also see the pitfalls. There's a man named Roan who came from another town, freedom paper in hand, stories on his tongue. Said he was going to start a carting business. 2 months later, he was gone. Rumor has it he drank too much and gambled the rest. Some say he got caught without papers at the wrong time. Others say he went back voluntarily, said the cage was warmer than the wind. Historians still debate whether towns truly absorbed freed people into their fabric. Some argue towns were sanctuaries, engines of social mobility. Others say they were meat grinders. Chew you up, spit you out, forget your name. In your case, maybe both. One thing certain status still matters. You're free, yes, but you're not a guild member. That means no protection, no official rights, no legal backing if someone steals your recipe or blocks your stall. You exist in the margin. Legal limbo wrapped in an apron. You try to join the Bakers Guild. They laugh. Maybe in 10 years, one man says. If you don't poison anyone. You smile politely. Then you walk away and sell 3 more loaves by the church steps. The priest even buys one. He blesses it. You wonder if that makes it holy bread or just wet. You start saving for an oven of your own. Not a borrowed hearth, not a hole in the ground with stones. A real oven, brick-lined, covered yours. It becomes your obsession. Every spare coin. every extra crust not eaten. You dream of the day when the smoke curling from that chimney means you made this. Not someone above you, not for someone else's feast, but even as you climb, you watch, because you've seen how quickly fortunes turn. One illness, and your whole business is gone. One fire, and your roof becomes ash. One guard in a bad mood, and your paper means nothing. You still sew it into your clothes. You hear of a town, too. The north, where freed people are given starter plots, new land, undeveloped, granted in exchange for loyalty. It sounds too good to be true. It probably is, but you file it away. Possibility is a new flavor for you. Sweet, rare, slightly dangerous. One evening, while delivering bread, you pass a man in chains. He's filthy, thin, dragging his feet, being escorted by 2 guards toward the outer wall. He sees you. You see him. His eyes widen just slightly, not in recognition, but in memory of something he once had, or almost had. You don't ask questions, but you don't sleep well that night either, because freedom isn't armor. It doesn't stop bad luck or cruel men. It doesn't guarantee success. It's just ... permission to try, to fall, to get up again. And every time you hand someone a loaf, and they pay without asking your past, you feel it. The weight of choice. The miracle of small exchanges. Your name, once listed in manor rolls, is now on a slate in the marketplace. Bread backs loaves. Warm at midday. It's a joke, yes, but it's your joke. You chose it. That makes all the difference. Sometimes, you look back. You picture the manor, the fields, the cracked feet and crooked tools, the smell of damp hay and long silence. It's not nostalgia. It's measurement. A way to chart the distance you've come. And still, you walk forward. You're not just surviving anymore. You're making things. Feeding people. Leaving a mark. However small, and for the first time, in a very long time, you catch yourself thinking of tomorrow. Not with dread, but with plans. Your oven is nearly done. It's not much to look at, just a brick dome on a stone base, patched with clay and smoke smudged at the corners. But it works. It holds heat. It keeps the loaves warm, long after dawn. It's yours. That's the important part. You light it before sunrise. The smoke curls upward in ribbons, and you catch the first rays of light slipping through the alley, casting long shadows that remind you of the plow lines from your old field. Except now, you're the one planting, and it's bread, not barley. And this time, what grows is yours to keep. Word spreads. People come earlier now. Some lean against the wall, with arms folded, waiting. Others trade you things, old coins, a half-dented pewter spoon, in exchange for just one crust. You don't say no. You understand what it means to want. More than you can ask for. A boy starts coming regularly. Thin, wiry, curious. Doesn't say much, but he watches the dough rise like it's alchemy. One day you hand him a lump of dough, and nod toward the table. He doesn't smile, but he stays. You never ask his story. He never offers it. You teach him the rhythm. Fold, need rest. You call it, listening to the bread. He tilts his head and says, "It sounds quiet." You grin. Then you're doing it right. That boy starts showing up every morning. Eventually, you call him apprentice, and others start too as well. Just like that, you're no longer alone. The town reeve stops by one afternoon. Not for bread, for questions. Says he's heard your name mentioned at council. You've made yourself a fixture, he says. You nod cautiously, unsure where this is going. He gestures to your oven, your stall, your ledger carved into bone. That's a lot for someone without guild papers. You feel the breath leave your lungs. You've been careful, paid your tolls, greased the palms that needed greasing. But the reeve's gaze is steady. Then he says something strange. There's a baker's apprentice spot open next quarter. Official like not many know it yet. You blink. You mean in the guild. He nods. Not a master, not yet. But it's a start. And it comes with protection. That word, protection. It lands like stone. You know what he means. Guild members can't be arrested without cause. Their shops can't be taxed arbitrarily. They're listed, recognized, counted in the fabric of the town. It's a ladder rung you didn't think you'd reach. You thank him too, formally. Maybe, but he just shrugs and walks off, whistling. Later that night, you unwrap your manumission paper and smooth the creases. It still feels fragile, like it could vanish if held too tightly. But now, with guild papers on the horizon, it might not be your only shield. Historians often debate how far freed people could truly rise. Most agree there were limits walls built from class, from lineage, from deeply rooted suspicion. But others point to exceptions. A freedman who became a town alderman, a former slave who donated to a monastery, a few rare who married into tradesmen's families and had their children born freeborn. You think of that, sometimes children. You never had any in the village. Too much labor, too little time. But now, the idea is different. Not just of having them, but raising them in a house with a door that locks, where stew isn't a luxury, and real books might live on a shelf one day. You're getting ahead of yourself. But dreaming has become a habit now, a good one, a dangerous one. Your apprentice, the quiet boy, is becoming sharper. He experiments, suggests cinnamon in the crust. You try it, it sells. He draws little marks on the loaves, so customers know which flavor is which. Not all of us can read, he says. You laugh. You sound like someone who can. He blushes. The two of you are making a name, not just in the square, but with merchants, with clerks, even with the odd friar who likes honey-glazed ends. You're not rich. You may never be. But you're stable. You're seen. And then, one evening, the steward returns. Not the one from before. A new one, younger, less cruel, but more ambitious. He recognizes you. Not with malice, more like recognition. "Bread back, isn't it?" he asks. "You're from the manor, the freedman." You nod, unsure what's coming. "We're reviewing the old villain records," he says. "Some oddities in the manumission logs. Old ink, odd witnesses. You may be summoned. Just a routine check." And there it is, at chill. That reminder that even now, years later, you're still vulnerable. That your freedom exists on paper, and that paper can still burn. You don't sleep that night. The oven stays cold. Your apprentice asks, "What's wrong?" You tell him everything. He stares a long time, then says, "If they come for you, I'll say I'm the one who bakes." It's a foolish gesture, but it means everything. The hearing never happens. The steward moves on, or forgets, or finds nothing. But the scare reminds you, freedom must be protected. Not just with laws, but with community. People who vouch for you, who show up. Who say, "He made my bread every week, and it never killed me." The next spring, the guild accepts you as an apprentice baker officially. You wear the patch, pay the dues, fill out your stall's name in proper ink. It feels like a ceremony, even if it's just paperwork in a dusty room. You go home that night, stare at the oven, and whisper, "We made it." And for once, you mean we. You're standing in front of your stall, the new guild patch stitched to your shoulder. It's crooked. Yes, your sewing hasn't improved, but it gleams in the sun, and everyone sees it, especially the ones who used to ignore you. Now they nod. Some even tip their caps. One man offers you a trade deal. You counter. He grins. You shake hands. Just like that, you're no longer invisible. Your apprentice, no longer just a boy. Not quite a man grins like he made the bread himself. Which, technically, he did. You've let him take over more of the baking. It's no longer just your hands shaping loaves. It's both of yours. There's something terrifyingly beautiful in that. The work doesn't lose its meaning. It multiplies. And the town starts treating you differently. Not much, just enough to notice. The toll collector now waves you through without counting your crates twice. The reeve no longer lingers at your stall looking for bribes. Even the butcher down the lane, who once laughed at your freeman's flour, now sends over the occasional bone for broth. It's as if the guild patch has erased the weight of where you came from, or at least covered it with a clean new layer. You keep your manumission document in a chest now, wrapped in waxed cloth and bound with string. You don't need to carry it anymore, not every day. But you still check it once in a while. just to remember, just to be sure. One morning, a messenger arrives from the manor, a letter stamped official. You unfold it slowly, heart thumping. It's an invitation. The old lord is dead. His son, now master, has requested your bread for the funeral feast. The letter doesn't mention your former bondage, doesn't even acknowledge your past, just calls you Master Baker. You read that line twice, then a third time. Then you sit down because your knees go a bit soft. You bake that week like your life depends on it. Loaves, cakes, sweet rolls twisted with currants and crushed hazelnuts. Your apprentice helps. He doesn't ask questions, but he works like a man possessed. You deliver the order yourself. The manor hasn't changed. Same stone walls, same creaky gate, same crooked chimney, but you have. The steward who once watched you scrub floors now greets you with a forced smile. You nod, cool and professional. You don't bow. You unload the bread into the kitchen and spot one of the ladies in waiting from years ago. She doesn't recognize you. Or if she does, she pretends not to. Either way, you're fine with that. As you leave, a stable boy offers to help carry the empty crates. He looks about 14, mud to his knees, cheeks hollow. You see your younger self in his hunched shoulders. You slip him a small round roll, sweetened, still warm. He blinks like it's gold. Eat slow, you say. It's not going anywhere. He nods and scurries off. You walk back to town with lighter crates and heavier thoughts. Historians often debate what social mobility looked like for the medieval unfree. Was it a true climb, or just a shuffle sideways? Were guilds gatekeepers, or lifelines? Some say former slaves were forever marked suspect, second tier, easy to scapegoat. Others argue that in towns, merit mattered more than birth, especially if you filled bellies. You've lived that question, and the answer is, both prejudice lingers. But bread talks louder. Back in the town square, people clap you on the back. Word of the manor feast spreads. Your name travels in whispers and breadcrumbs. Someone even calls you the Lord's baker. You shake your head, not his, just the one he pays. It's a fine line, but one worth drawing. And then, things shift again. You receive an offer, a larger shop, a corner building with a real wooden sign, and space for a second oven. It's owned by a widow moving to join her daughter's household. She offers it at a fair price, too fair, almost. You've fed my family for years, she says. Time you had walls. You hesitate. It's a big leap. More debt, more visibility, but also more control, more growth, more possibility. Your apprentice says, we can do it. And that we feels like a stone landing in a quiet pond. You nod. You buy the shop. It takes months to move in, clean, scrub, reinforce the roof. Build the second oven with your own hands. Your apprentice nearly burns his eyebrows off, testing the new chimney draft, but the bread comes out golden. You name the shop Stone and Crust. It's simple, honest, heavy. You hang your guild certificate on the wall. Below it, behind a wooden panel, you hide your manumission slip. Not because you're ashamed, but because you know your roots matter, and so does your shelter. A friar visits one day, curious about the name. He asks if you came from stone, that is, hard beginnings. You just smile and say, everyone starts somewhere. Not everyone ends. There you begin to hire help. A girl with strong arms and quiet focus. A boy who sings while sweeping. They're good. They care. You pay them fairly. You tell them they can leave, if they ever want to. They stay, and in small ways, you begin to change the world around you. You donate bread to the orphan house. You speak at market meetings. You suggest names of other freed folk for guild slots. You help one woman draft her manumission petition. She brings you a cooked apple the next week, blushing. Freedom, you realize, is like baking. You don't just make it once and walk away. You have to tend it, feed it, protect it from collapse. Sometimes it burns. Sometimes it grows. You think of the village, of the goat, of the boy you were, staring through steam at a pheasant he would never taste. You don't feel bitter, just grateful that you left, and you keep going. One loaf, one day, one story at a time. You're in the middle of shaping the morning's rye, when you hear it footsteps on the stone outside your shop. Not the lazy scuff of regulars, or the hurried patter of delivery boys, but deliberate steps. Measured, clean-sol. Lead you wipe flour from your hands, peek past the curtain, and see a man in a gray wool tabard, a heavy seal swinging from his neck. A notary. You exhale slowly. It's probably about taxes. It's always about taxes. But it's not. He asks to speak with you formally, over a table, with ink. You sit him down in the back room, pour a mug of watered ale, and brace yourself. The notary pulls a scroll from his satchel and unrolls it. Slowly, like a priest unwrapping a relic. It's a land deed. Someone, he says, has nominated you as trustee of a small property. South Quarter. Includes a dwelling, a stall, and a back garden, provided you accept the conditions. You blink. Who? He doesn't answer. Just gestures to the line at the bottom. Anonymous donor. Formerly bound. Your mind spins. Is it a joke, a test, a trap? But it's real. The deed's legit. Stamped, sealed, witnessed. All legal, you accept, of course. Who wouldn't? And when you visit the plot, just a half-day's walk from your current shop, you find it's humble, but promising. The stall needs repair. The garden's overgrown. The house leans like it's tired. But the soil smells good. The foundation's strong. It's yours now. You think about the words. Formerly bound. Someone else who knew, who saw you, who rose, and instead of forgetting, reached back. You decide to do the same. You turn the garden into a community patch. Let apprentices tend it between baking shifts. Let the elderly take herbs from it without asking. You hire a young girl whose mother died in the plague last spring. She kneads like she's punishing the world. But her hands learn fast, and still, the bread comes, morning after morning. Spiced, salted, honeyed. Some loaves go to nobles, some to beggars. All of them carry the same thing. Your imprint, your memory, your escape. The friar returns one afternoon. He brings a book, a real one, leather-bound, gently used, filled with Latin phrases and blank margins. You might want to leave more than just flour behind, he says. You understand? You've been thinking about that too. So you start writing. Not a chronicle, not a confession. Just moments, thoughts, smells, recipes, yes, but also questions. Like why no one ever taught you that cinnamon came from a tree. Or how freedom tastes, different when it's shared. Your apprentice reads them sometimes, squinting. He corrects your spelling once. You throw a crust at his head. He ducks and laughs. You begin speaking at guild meetings. At first they stare, then they listen. Then, they vote your ideas in. You suggest bread pricing standards to protect the poor. You offer to train freedmen for half wages. One baker grumbles. You tell him he can lump it or bake better. You're no longer invisible. You're no longer afraid. But you haven't forgotten. Historians still puzzle over cases like yours. How rare were they? How many freed folk actually rose to prominence? Some say barely a handful ever broke through guild barriers. Others point to documents like the kind you now write, suggesting a quiet wave of change in market towns across Europe. One baker, one carpenter, one tailor. All small stories, but enough eventually to tip something larger. You dream differently now, not of safety or money or even titles, but of continuity, of someone carrying your story forward. Not in books, necessarily, but in the way they knead dough, count coins, ask questions. One night, your apprentice knocks on your door. His hands are shaking. They want to conscript me, he says. To fight. He looks like he's swallowed smoke. I'm not even from here, he adds. They don't even care. You sit him down, pour water, let him talk. He doesn't. Want to run? He says. But he doesn't want to go. He doesn't even believe in the fight. It's not my war, he whispers. It's just theirs. You stare at the hearth, at the embers that flicker but never speak. Then you open a box. Inside, your old parchment, the manumission paper, still intact, still bearing the seal. You unfold it and say, I know what it means to belong nowhere. He looks at you, wide-eyed. Silent. I can't stop the war, you say. But I can make sure you stay fed, stay whole, stay you. The next morning, you go to the town council. Use your voice, your vote, your trade influence. Pull strings. Offer bread for a month to the garrison cook. By evening, your apprentice is removed from the draft list. You don't tell him how close it came. He hugs you. Briefly, you pretend not to notice. You write that night long and slow. You write about choices, about baking, about legacy, about surviving without surrendering. The next morning, the sun rises over the garden, and the loaves rise in the oven, and the town stirs like dough beginning to wake. And you, baker, freeman, former slave, begin again. You're older now, not bent and brittle. Not yet, but you move slower. Knees click in the cold. You find yourself grunting when you bend to the lower oven shelf, and sometimes you pause halfway up the stairs, pretending to admire a beam just to catch your breath. But you still wake before the sun. Still feel that itch in your hands when the dough rests too long. Still know how to listen to a loaf not with your ears, but with your bones. Your apprentice is no longer an apprentice. He's a baker in his own right now, has his own stall, across the square. Still calls you boss out of habit, but now it's with a smirk instead of reverence. You don't mind. You've had worse nicknames. The guild calls you respected elder now. Not because of your age, but because you stuck around, kept baking, kept speaking up. Never took bribes. Only burned to council records. Accidentally, probably sometimes. When you look out over the town square, it hits you how much has changed. There's more light now. Not just sunlight, but possibility. You see it in the girls apprenticing with the clothmakers, in the old man running the bookstall, who used to sweep the street, in the midwife who once lived in the poorhouse, now holding court in her own herb-walled cottage. You helped some of them, gave bread, wrote letters, taught them how to speak in meetings. It's a skill most don't think about, but you know how much weight a sentence can carry when it's timed right. And yet, for all that's changed, some things haven't. You still flinch when someone mentions inventory. You still check your deed twice a year, just in case. You still walk wide around knights when they come through town. They wear swords like declarations. You wear scars like tucked-away memories. A friar, yes, the same one, older than ever again. He carries your book. Your book, the one you've been scribbling in for years. You should let the priory copy this, he says, or it'll disappear with you. You don't answer immediately, because part of you still wonders if your story should be kept. What if it's just one lucky loaf in a basket of burnt crusts? What if it gives people hope where none exists? But then, you see the girl from the herb stall teaching her younger cousin how to read. You see the old beggar, now clean, showing someone how to knot a fishing net. You see your apprentice's son stacking loaves with more care than strength, and you realize your story already is out there. It's in the rhythm of their days, in how they carry themselves, in how they look people in the eye. You give the friar the book. You can copy it, you say, but no embellishments. He laughs. Not even a few dragons. Only if they bake. Historians today still argue whether stories like yours were common or rare. Was upward mobility for freed slaves a miracle or a misunderstood norm? Were there more quiet revolutions in corners like yours, unrecorded, unsung, too ordinary for scribes? They debate documents, interpret tax rolls, fuss over guild charters, but they don't know what it feels like to need hope and to rye, to smell safety in an unburnt crust, to build a name from flour and fire. You do. One evening, you host a feast. Not grand, just long tables in the alley behind your shop, bread and broth, and a jug of wine from the apothecary. People bring things, cheeses, root pies, sweet preserves in chipped jars. You sit in the middle, surrounded by noise and laughter. And for the first time in weeks, you don't feel tired. Your apprentice stands and taps a spoon on his mug. For the baker, he says. The one who taught me not just how to knead, but how to stand. You raise your mug. I taught you to sweep. He grins. Same thing, really. Someone sings. Someone else spills wine. A dog steals a sausage. It's perfect. You don't remember falling asleep that night, but you wake with the scent of ash on your clothes and joy in your chest. And life goes on. You no longer bake every morning. You teach more, write more, sit in the sun when it's warm. But once a week, you make one loaf. Just one. The same way every time. You call it the Freeman's loaf. Dense, satisfying, a little bitter, keeps well through hard times. You always save the first slice for someone who needs it. Sometimes it's a boy from the poor quarter. Sometimes it's an old woman you haven't seen in a year. Sometimes it's just someone who's quiet, too. Quiet, standing by the edge of the stall like they're not sure they belong. You offer the slice without question, always with the same words. It's yours. Take it slow. It's not going anywhere. Because you remember what it meant when someone said that to you. The winters feel longer now. Maybe they always did. But back when you were young, you were too busy hauling sacks and lighting ovens to notice the sting in your joints. Now, you sit more. Wrap your knees in wool. Let others tend the early fires. You supervise, advise. And once, in a while step in, when the dough feels off, and no one can figure out why. The others watch closely, when you do. It's like you've become a kind of walking legend, not just the baker who started from nothing, but the one who stayed. In a town where people vanish, drift, die, or give up, that matters. Your old oven still works. You had it reinforced, and now it's more solid than most houses in the quarter. Every few weeks someone stops by, just to look at it like it's a sacred relic. You don't discourage them. If a chunk of soot-stained brick can inspire someone to keep going, why not? You receive letters, now actual letters, requests, questions. A boy from a nearby village asks how to become a baker. A young woman from the capital writes that she read your story in a Priory transcript and wants to open a Freeman's Cafe. You chuckle at that calf, in this age. But still, it's charming. And then one morning, a stranger comes to your shop. He's young, maybe 17, quiet, sunburned, hair like wet straw. He doesn't buy anything, just stands there, staring at the loaves with something like longing stitched across his brow. You recognize it instantly. You invite him inside. Hand him a slice of the Freeman's loaf. He stares at it, like it might speak Latin. You say nothing, just gesture toward the bench. He eats slowly, then he speaks. I was born in the salt works. We weren't supposed to leave, but I did. You nod. I walked for 3 days. Got here by following carts. You nod again. They told me about. You said you were real, that you'd understand. You look at his hands, raw, thick-knuckled, familiar. You think about the day you left your own village. The way the silence felt like punishment. The way the road felt like freedom and threat, wrapped in the same dusty air. You ask his name. He hesitates, then gives you a false one. You let it pass, and, just like that, you take him in. Not because you're feeling generous, but because someone once made room for you. And because this is what freedom becomes when it grows old enough to take root in someone else's life. You teach him the basics, how to stoke the fire, how to sweep without chasing soot into the flour. He messes up constantly. You don't mind. He listens, and that's enough. You let him rest in the attic. Make him clean the benches. You give him tasks that seem useless until he realizes they're not. Others raise eyebrows. A few whisper. One old trader says, "You're keeping a runaway." You reply, "I'm keeping him from starving." That shuts him up. Historians still wrestle with this idea. The transformation of freed people from survivors into shelters. Not all managed it. Most didn't. But a few just enough found a way to convert hardship into haven. It didn't rewrite laws, but it changed lives. You're proof of that. And now, this boy might be too. He starts asking questions about the oven, about baking times, about salt ratios. You give him a ledger, and he starts marking loaves with tiny symbols, dots, and dashes. His own code. One day, he asks what manumission means. You pause, then you bring out your paper. The old one. Still sealed, though the wax has cracked. You let him hold it. His hands tremble. He reads slowly. When he reaches the word freed, he looks at you with a quiet kind of awe. You earned this? He asks. No, you say I survived for it. Earning came later. He nods like he understands. You think maybe he does. That night, he needs dough without being told. You smile in the dark. Later that month, the friar stops by again. He brings a second copy of your book, the one the priory wrote out by hand. This version has gold trim on the title page. The Freeman's Loaf, it says. You roll your eyes. Too fancy, you mutter. But deep down, you're flattered. They're copying it for other towns now. For reading rooms. For guild apprentices. For people who might never know your name, but will know what it meant to keep baking when the world told you to disappear. You place the second copy on your shelf. Next to the original. It feels like a full circle. The boy your second apprentice, though you don't call him that, asks if he can write in the margins. You say yes, of course yes. That's what margins are for. Sometimes, the memories come back, of chains, of cold floors. Of that day you saw someone whipped for stealing a turnip. You don't push them away. But you don't let them anchor you either. They're part of the recipe, now bitter notes, in a loaf that mostly tastes of survival. And you keep going, not because you have to, but because you can. One evening, as you close the shop, you see the boy handing bread to a woman with threadbare gloves. He tells her softly, "Take it slow. It's not going anywhere." You pause, smile, feel the warmth rise in your chest, like an oven beginning to glow. Your hands may ache. Your eyes may blur. But your work, your life, is still rising. Section 15. The smell of toasted oats and apple peel hangs in the shop as the sun sets behind the rooftops. You're sitting in your usual spot by the window, legs wrapped in a wool blanket, watching the last customers drift home. You've done this so many times it should feel ordinary, but it doesn't. Not tonight. Tonight. There's something different in the air. A quiet weight. The kind that settles just before a season changes. You hold your latest ledger in your lap. It's not just a list of loaves anymore. It's stories, names, moments. One page for the girl who started weaving her own baskets and bartering them for bread. Another for the young priest who gave your freeman's loaf as part of communion. A whole section filled with notes from apprentices who moved on, opened shops, raised children. Your second apprentice note, your junior partner now walks in, flour on his cheek, holding a basket of leftover rolls. For the night house, he says, referring to the poor shelter. You nod. He doesn't ask if you want to come. He knows your knees won't make the trip in the dark. Instead, he leaves the door open behind him, just enough for the sounds of evening to slip in, crackling torches, a lute from someone's window, a child's sleepy giggle. The world keeps turning. You turn your thoughts back to the beginning. Not the shop, not the guild. Before all that, the village, the Lord's Field, the goat, the cramped smoky hovel where your dreams were kept in check by reality, the iron collar on your neighbor's neck, the way your hands once trembled every time the steward walked by, as if he might revoke your existence on a whim. It seems like a different life, someone else's life, and yet it's yours. You never escaped it. You transformed it, turned weight into yeast, guilt into grain, made peace with a past that never apologized. You open your chest one last time and pull out the parchment, the manumission paper. You hold it gently, like it might crumble. Run your fingers along the familiar script, the cracked seal, the witness, names long gone now. This paper, this fragile, wrinkled thing, once carried the entire meaning of your existence. Proof that you are not property, that your time belonged to you. Now, it's just memory. You could burn it, and nothing would change. But you don't. You fold it, slide it back inside the chest, and close the lid. Because while that paper once set you free, it's not what keeps you free anymore. That's the bread, the people, the stories, that circle around you like the rising scent of cinnamon at dawn. Historians may never agree on how many people like you there, or how many broke free. Built lives, left marks that outlasted their names. Most of them, they say, vanished into the backdrop of time, forgotten, silent, but not you. Your shop still stands. Your apprentices still bake. Your loaf still feeds. You've become part of the town's fabric, warm, enduring, and now, as the wind brushes against the window, and the night settles in, you feel something soft and profound. Not pride, not triumph. Something quieter. Rest. You've done enough, and the world, imperfect and unsteady as it is, will continue rising. Without you, just like dough in a warm room. The oven cools slowly, radiating that last warmth into the floorboards, into your bones. You sit with your hands folded in your lap. No more kneading, no more fire-stoking, no more measuring or counting. Just breath, just stillness, just the quiet. Outside, the street narrows into darkness. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then nothing. A curtain flutters in the wind, and you imagine the town holding its breath, wrapped in the gentle hush of sleep. You take a final sip of broth, thick and salty. It tastes like memory, like everything that came before, and everything that never had to be spoken aloud. You swallow slowly, savoring every note, then set the cup down, across the room. Your freeman's loaf rests on a wooden board hole, untouched, its crust golden and uncracked. It'll be sliced tomorrow, given away, shared as always. But for now, it's perfect. Whole, waiting. You lean back, your eyes close, and you remember not just chains and ash, but laughter, rising dough. The comfort of a shop full of the scent of cardamom and quiet footsteps and care. The echo of lessons passed gently from hand to hand. Freedom, you realize, isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's not always glorious. Sometimes, it's just a warm room, a cooling oven, and the peace of knowing you're no longer hungry. The past will sleep with you, but it will not wake you. Sweet dreams.